secret level is out now, and among many other games, it has an episode dedicated exclusively to Armored Core. I've seen it a couple of times now, and I thought I could share my thoughts on it with you Ravens since there's quite a lot to like here but also some room for criticism. I want to get right to the point, but I must warn you I'm going to inevitably spoil the episode for anyone watching, so I highly recommend you give it a go before you listen to me. That's your spoiler warning. Okay, with that out of the way, I just want to say this was a very entertaining CG project. Regardless of what source material it's trying to cover, on a technical standpoint, I find it incredibly impressive. Smooth animation, gorgeous textures, and awesome environmental art make it feel like a genuine shot at making something that resonates with fans of the franchise. Though one thing did bug me, it feels like everything is just a tad bit darker than it should be. Not sure if it's purposeful or not, but some shots are very difficult to register properly since the overall brightness is low. Maybe it's my setup, but that did put me off, especially in moments where things were happening pretty fast on screen. Visual clarity would go down significantly. However, what you really want to hear is how it fares as an Armored Core piece of media, and to that extent, it serves as an interesting, yet disconnected, glimpse at some of what these games have to offer. Its biggest limitation is its runtime. Clocking in at a measly 11 minutes, give or take, it barely has any breathing room to get going and elaborate on what could otherwise be a captivating narrative. Now, for us nerds, it's never really explicitly stated but somewhat implied through the referencing of human augmentation, the protagonist having a voice inside their head that parallels air, and the use of Armored Core 6 weapon units that this might indeed be set somewhere in the 6th generation timeline, either before, during, or after the events of that game. Where? I have no clue, but it's stated to take place in a frostbitten frontier world, which bears some resemblance to Rubicon 3, although I believe it to not be related at all. Something else that feels really uncanny is the introduction of actual humans emoting, talking, and for the most part being the major focus of this whole episode. Armored Core games have established a style of storytelling that relies entirely on faceless voices, placeholder mute main characters that stand in for the players, and lots of written logs, emails, or information that do most of the heavy lifting in world building. Lots of us love that approach, something that was always present in the official CG trailers for these games, which leads me to question whether or not having Keanu Reeves front and center of this story was the best choice for this franchise in particular. Despite that, the acting and characterization are pretty on point for how I imagine a junkie Raven would act, so I ended up letting it roll and not minding it too much. The plot itself is quite straightforward. This protagonist, let's call him John Core, is portrayed as an augmented human with a short fuse and a cocky attitude. People shun him for being a dog of war whose only reason to live is killing, and given his character arc, that might actually be a good judgment call since the first thing we see him doing is jumping into a bar fight and acting like an unstable chainsmoker. We learn he's the last of the old school augmentation subjects, something that earns him no favors since augmented humans are seen as soulless fighters whose only place is in the battlefield. We also learn that for some reason people call the titular machines cores, which, well, that is definitely a choice. Might be a bit of a cheeky language quirk for those natives, or it might just be, I don't know. I'm not sure what it was, but fuck that. They're ACs. Call them ACs please. Moving on. John Core is an outcast piece of shit, but at least he has some nice banter with the voice inside his head. After settling his little bar tussle, John gets a job request from what is presumed to be his handler, a nice callback to how we as players get missions from handler Walter in AC6. For this job, details are kept nice and scarce, something that is actually touched upon in the following scene as John heads to his hangar and starts preparing to board his AC the Shrieker. Sorry, his Core, the Shrieker. This scene conveys just how much John, and by extension most guns for hire, are left in the dark, expendable, on a tight leash, and on the road to self-exploitation just to turn a quick buck or survive. While I would like to have seen more of this, as it's not only one of the key themes of the franchise but also a fascinating plot thread, the episode cut it off in an effort to push the story forward. I appreciate the effort, and there's a nice tie-in to it at the very end, but still, more of this. Next up, John Core starts the boarding sequence, and I confidently think it's the second coolest moment of the entire episode. Lots of flashing switches, hard wiring into the Core's cockpit systems, the AC's systems, sorry. And we even get what I think is a small reference to the grid catapult cutscene from Armored Core 6. Good stuff. What isn't so good is how we managed to have a fully animated Armored Core piece of media without a single drop, not a mere mention, of the game's main selling point, its customization. That's the whole stick. I felt it was way too ballsy to completely ignore it in favor of more action. So yeah, if you want to see AC parts being swapped out, repairs being done, or anything of the sort, you won't find it here. What you'll find is the Vanguard overbooster. Fuck yeah. After blasting off into the mission area, John Core gets into an epic chase down and fights against a squad of very coordinated ACs. Honestly, here the execution is flawless, and we get some amazing eye candy from the animators. We see AC parts being blown off, different kinds of weapons and some builds being showcased, a buttery smooth laser blade swinging about cutting cores in half, and a really out of place scene where John Core accelerates up into the sky in an offensive maneuver, only to pass out due to G-forces? I'm not sure what happens there, but I don't think AC pilots ever had to worry about passing out under those circumstances, so it ends up feeling a little goofy and out of place. Nonetheless, this all culminates in a cocky celebration upon getting rid of all the enemies on sight. I won't spoil the ending because I believe it to be the best moment of the whole episode, but safe to say we get some confirmation on how fucked up John Core's head really is. That's the gist of it. Honestly, I left wanting more and felt it was a huge teaser rather than a self-enclosed narrative. On a more subjective note, I think fans of Armored Core will be hunting down for little clues and references that won't really feel very substantial, while newcomers might get somewhat of a wrong impression of what the games are about. Still, this episode at least showcases the cool and flashy mech violence factor and raises some powerful intrigues regarding human experimentation, enough to keep people interested for more. My expectations were set a bit too high, I think. This is a fun watch for sure, but fails to capture the game's essence. Still, this is coming from a superfan. My perspective is obviously skewed and is going to be unreasonable most of the time. I think there's some cool subtext here and there when it comes to the way augmented humans are perceived, and the relationship between John Core, the voice in his head, and the external world, but honestly maybe just 5 more minutes would have helped the whole thing become more fleshed out. I wanted to see some nod to assembling your AC, some mention of a corporation or any hint in that direction. Alas, what we got is still a solid bit of content and I enjoyed it for what it was. In any case, let me know down in the comments what you thought of the whole episode and if you have any gripes with it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content. I'll see you in the next one. Stay boosting.